Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Tonight's video, I'm going to talk to you guys about crisis and dealing with friends or acquaintances that are in crisis. Um, I had a very recent example within the last 24 hours of this situation. It really compelled me to get on here and talk about potential ways that you can handle similar situations. We're in a tough world right now, and all kinds of things are going on in people's minds, lives, circumstances, behaviors. Getting things are catching up with people from past, and just struggles are very real for individuals. And sometimes out of nowhere, they get to a point where they just can't take it anymore. And tonight, we're going to talk about that. If you're in the recovery community or around mental health situations, you will inevitably run into a circumstance like I have within the last 24 hours. And I'm not going to name any names, but the circumstance was troubling, concerning, all of those things, weighed heavy on my mind and my heart. But I've learned over time on certain ways I'm able to handle things, in certain ways it's unproductive for all involved to handle them. So I had a situation. I lost touch with a friend of mine that I knew. We were friends probably 15 years ago is when we started acquaintance. I was around this individual for a couple of years, closely associated with other friends of mine. And through my addiction and challenges in life, we just parted ways. And so no animosity or anything else, just life took us separate paths. Mine took me down a very destructive path. This individual lived pretty much in the same mode and has for a good portion of their adult life. We've lost touch. I don't know from between then and now, what's gone on. I can only assume based on circumstances within the last 24 hours that things have not gone well. Probably a year or so ago, I went into a AA meeting here in the small city I live in, that's right next to Rochester. I was in an AA meeting and walked in, and there was this person. I didn't even recognize the person. It's been so long, and age caught us all. And this individual had changed quite a bit. Not negative, it's just older and out of context. You don't expect to see somebody. I don't know if you ever had that, but I'm terrible about that. If, excuse me, I see you and I could work with you every single day and bump into you at a grocery store and like kind of go through that eye flutter wondering who the heck you were, because you're not in the context that my brain can process. And this is kind of what happened that day. Well, this individual, we had a nice little chat, and at the end of the meeting, probably 5 minutes or so, and then we went on our way, and I haven't heard or seen this person since. I would say probably a year. That's probably a year ago, roughly. As time went on, I saw this person in our local city in a store. And then within 24 hours, got a text message saying, "Hey, I think I saw you there, but you seemed a little lost." And I acknowledged that, again, it was one of these things where context, you weren't supposed to be there, because the only place I have you is around the restaurants and things that we used to hang around with back then. So it was just odd to see this person there, especially when they're not in my day-to-day life. And out of that, it was an outreach really, because they were struggling and just needed somebody to talk to that understood the journey. And so within a day or so, probably within a week, it was a week, had been contacted that they needed some help, were really struggling, had lost their hope, really didn't care about anything. I mean, the exact words were, "I don't care about anything or anybody," which I found all too familiar as I draw back on my own recovery journey and how we can get that way. It's not that we're, want to harm ourselves or anybody else. We just don't care if any of those things happen. It's just how it works out. Well, that was the initial conversation. We had, apparently this individual had just come out of a hospitalization for a seizure, is my understanding. Yeah, it was a seizure, but it was related to substance use, alcohol particularly, and some of the problems with withdrawal. And so they had just been discharged from the hospital, and then had reached out to me about getting some support. So over the next several days, withdrawal, apparently I was getting a lot of texts relative to the withdrawal process that they were going through, the struggle that was going on, the sickness, and it seemed very protracted. So I can only think that they hadn't been hydrating or eating correctly prior to this. And like I often did, I was only drinking. And then as time went on, I was really in trouble when it got to the point of quitting drinking, as my withdrawal would be just absolutely extraordinary. And so I think that's what it felt like that this person was going through, is this extraordinary struggle with withdrawal. And so these text messages were, pretty prevalent over that period of time. And then around day 6 or so, they got their feet back underneath them and were ready to get back to work. So went back and got a job back and was back on their feet. Sobriety, a real possibility. And I was getting a lot of thanks for supporting, and that they wouldn't know where they were going to be. Now, I didn't do anything magical. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting there. Now, it's a drawn out story to tell you this. Things were going well. Then I get a call a couple days ago, probably 3 days ago now, that this person's back in the hospital again. My question was, with withdrawal, allegedly it was an anxiety attack. So I'm not sure what it was that perpetuated, recent thinking, but it seemed like there was some real momentum going on, and then something happened. Yesterday, now a day removed from this, I hadn't heard anything all day long on how this person was doing. I checked in to see how it was going. Hadn't heard anything, which was not uncommon. We don't really communicate that much, only in the middle of crisis, which is, I think, probably for those of you that are a fellow traveler with others, you probably run in the same situation. Then I started getting very troubling messages relative to self-harm, loss of hope, giving up, last straw, all this other stuff. Now, my first inclination was probably drinking, because I know for myself, I could be very gloom and doom when I was, if I'd had a relapse after I'd put some effort into not drink. My circumstances around me back in 2017 and 16 really kind of put me in that mindset. So I can really understand how somebody's feeling that way. And a lot of times they're just emoting to get people to come to them and be near them. And so I learned that over time, but I didn't know it then. So knowing that when people are in this state of mind, what I try to do is just be present. I don't give a lot of advice. I'm just trying to create avenues for people to have access and help them remove barriers where they want. But I really try not to push on it. But this conversation really started to become very focused on, and I'm talking obsessed with, ending all things. And that bothered me, because I felt helpless and hopeless. So I got in my car and I went to where this person works, and had understood that they had left work. And so my assumption is they probably had been terminated from their job for missing work, because the show was going on and this person wasn't there. So my next move was probably go down to the parking lot of a liquor store that I know that she mentioned she frequented. So I went down that parking lot and thought I saw, not knowing how this person drives, what kind of car they drive, I knew obviously what they look like. And I saw a car pulling out that I thought was that person. So I started to follow it. Followed it probably 8-10 miles. Sent a quick text saying, "Hey, I'm right behind you, pull over." I got a comment saying, "I'm not on that road." So I'd misread the road that the person was on. And by that point in time, they had traveled into Rochester, the city of Rochester, and were making plans that were very troubling. So I'm going to pause here. You may have run into these types of circumstances. And I'm not trying to air somebody's dirt. What I'm telling you is that for me, and the feelings that I was having through this whole thing, was trying to help save them. And that's really a tendency of mine, is that I feel when people get in crisis mode, I want to try to save them. I want to try to help them beyond it. And it's not because I'm so noble. It's just that I get caught up in this moment with what they're saying, and I've been in those feelings, and I want to give them a way to get out of it. I don't really want a sticker for it. I'm not trying to get a freaking trophy. What I'm trying to do is just say, "Hey, look, this doesn't have to be going down this way. And you came to me with, these sort of feelings. So I feel obligated to find a way to help you through this whole situation." It also weighs heavy on me too, because earlier on when these types of things would happen, I'd have a pass-fail analysis that I would do in my own head. And if this person wasn't successfully moving beyond it, as a failure for me, and somehow I missed the boat. I don't really think that way right now. And what I've been trying to do is make sure I'm healthier for the person that's getting support, and not making it anything about a reward system that I'm trying to accomplish for myself. So in this circumstance, I try to practice what I preach, but my initial response was to chase them down. I was taking the entire spiritual component out of this, and I also was taking healthy boundaries, saying I shouldn't be dragging myself down a road when this person has made this decision to follow down a different path. What I need to do is make sure that I'm in a circumstance that's allowing me to remove barriers for them so they can make better choices. What I do know is that when we're in these mindsets, there's nobody in the world going to help you break from that mindset. You're going to have to break it yourself. All you can do is present options. And that's what I want to encourage you tonight, is present options and be available when they're ready. I worked in an emergency room setting for a while as a New York State certified peer, and we call them SERPAs. And as a peer, my job in that department, as I've shared on here before, was to deal with overdose patients and those that are in the hospital with some other a substance use issue. And with alcoholics, a lot of times it was either people that had a wellness check and were heavily intoxicated, or in other circumstances where they had a chronic illness that had flared up because of their drinking. In those cases, I would deal with alcoholics. For the vast majority of the effort and energy was really around somebody coming in with an overdose or somebody coming in with substance use issues related to illegal drugs, and their families, and helping them navigate what to do next. And so from that mindset, I learned, and one of the pieces of advice I would give families is to be a lifeboat. And what I meant by that is that people struggling with addiction can easily and unknowingly destroy families around them, because the family around them is trying so hard to save them, they lose sight of their family as well. And so what happens is, rather than being a lifeboat, when the person struggling with mental health and addiction decides to come to the surface and pulling them in the boat, we try to make that boat a submarine and dive underwater with them every single time that person goes under, and then nobody's safe. The boat's gone, the stability is gone, the fresh air is gone, and now you're all out at sea with no rescue. So I've encouraged people, and I've had a hard time practicing what I preach, is to make sure you're a lifeboat and not make that lifeboat a submarine. And unfortunately, my first response yesterday was to be a submarine. When I turned around, realizing I wasn't following the right car, I just proceeded home with a very heavy heart, feeling like this person was convicted and convinced and obsessed with doing the worst that I would consider that person to do. There was a lot of silence. I got a phone call saying, "Thank you for everything you've done. I appreciate your friendship, but this is the last time you'll hear from me." And then silence. It's hard to know what to do with, because I didn't know where they were. I don't know what they drive. Certainly don't know a license plate. I didn't know any way to get a hold of them. And then I started getting a few texts a while bit later, which gave me some relief that this was really just needing somebody to come alongside. And the text started really obsess and go down the road again of even heavier things. And then I got a phone call later saying, I can't find access to this certain thing that they were trying to access. And they were going to go find a bridge. And then told me I can either stay on the phone or not. It's my choice. But they're going to accomplish this. That put me in a situation I wasn't really sure what to do with. Because selfishly, I don't want to hear somebody do that. Candidly, if you're going to do it, I don't really, first of all, don't understand why you'd want me to go through that with you if it's of no point. Secondly, I didn't want to get off that phone, because if there's any way that one word was going to keep them from doing something dumb, I want to do that. And before I could process that, the phone died. The phone was hung up on me. So I made a tough decision. I'm not a cop caller. I don't like it. I don't. Even in my closest family members, I'll try to find a way to deal with myself rather than call the police. The reason I don't is generally I've had bad experiences in those moments with law enforcement. I don't hate law enforcement. I don't hate generally law enforcement at all. And in fact, I know a few of them around here I see at the gym, and some with my evening job that I interact with quite a bit. And some of them are really great people, and I have no problem with them. But as a person in recovery, and having been in active use and homeless and having mental health issues, I've had some experiences, and my fiance's had some experiences that don't really give me a lot of faith that it's a good solution to call the police about anything. So I don't. I generally try to just take care of the circumstance the best I can, because what I found is that always elevates it into a bunch of uncontrolled things that make it worse on the person at hand. But this was really putting me in a situation where I have life and death or a principle. And so what I did is I called 988, and I'm going to share this with you. If you are not aware of what this is, I want you to be aware of what it is. 988, this is their website. 988 is a lifeline, and really what you do with 988 is you call it like you would 911. You can call it for yourself, or you can call it for a loved one. I called it for a loved one. They took my information, were very compassionate with what they were hearing, and knowledgeable about what they were handling. They then transferred me to 911. On 911, because of the way our city is now learned to work together with mental health services. They have a team that goes and seeks out these individuals. So some basic information they took from me, some general information had been provided about possible proximity of where this individual was, and they put on an alert that this is what's going on. At the end of that call, the 911 portion ended, and the 988 person talked to me about how I was feeling with the whole circumstance and make sure it wasn't driving me down a bad road, which I really felt was conscious thinking by this person about, generally speaking. One of the anomalies that I've seen over time is that if you go to a funeral for somebody overdosed and died, you're going to have multiple overdoses from people that are at that funeral or close friends of that person. It never fails because it's just too much. It's one more thing. It's a reminder of where they're at. And that you'll see that over and over again where overdoses happen. So I felt it was very good for the 988 operator to just do just a quick check-in with me to make sure I was okay. And of course I'm fine in that way. But as I acknowledge now, I'm just sad that was going on. So 988 is a great resource, and I would encourage you, if you find yourself in the circumstance that I'm in, cut to the chase and go right to 988. I didn't do that, and I put too much time deliberating. So why am I sharing this with you? Well, partly is because this was a difficult situation for me, and I've been around it for a while. You may be fresh into it and just had this thrown at you. It might be a loved one, a child, a brother, a sister, a friend, an acquaintance, somebody that just got your number somewhere and wants to talk to you. It could be any number of things that put you in the circumstance that you now are dealing with something when you're wholly unqualified to handle it. I'm wholly unqualified to handle that circumstance. I did not know what to do. So I probably spent too much time trying to convince this person not to go down a bad road, and probably should have just transferred it immediately over, because it was when it became clear that we were obsessing over the same subject matter. Because I felt like I got good service with 988, and I'm not sure how that played out, and I'll tell you why. So here we are. It's 11:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at this point when I record this video. This is well over 24 hours since my last contact with my friend, and I am uncertain of the outcome of that circumstance. I don't know. I've reached out a number of times today through phone calls, texts, whatever. The only encouragement I have is the phone is not dead, and it seems like it's still charging, or it would have been dead by now. I'm hoping that there was contact made, and this person is getting the resources they need to find hope and better days. All I can do is just trust the fact that this is a spiritual journey for me as well, and that out of all the possibilities 15 years later, that I would be the only person in that life at that time, that it has to be part of my purpose to be there. There has to have been some kind of an outcome that made that necessary for me to be there. And so for my spiritual beliefs, I believe that's why it is that I invest in those situations. That, like I said before, it's not for a trophy. I believe it's part of my purpose is to invest when those opportunities come up, because if they're not things that I look for, they seem to come across my path, and this was another one. It doesn't make me great. It just means that I'm in recovery, and that's what we all have happen to us when we embrace recovery wholly. I am sad and I am worried about the result of yesterday. I will be relieved if I get a text or phone call or something that says it was just a really bad season. I'm getting help. I don't know what, even if it's just a matter of I don't know what I'm doing with this. At least it's those 24 hours were time well spent contemplating the worst and rising above it. And that is my hope. That taking those worst contemplating thoughts and processing it to the point that you move through it, regardless of circumstance or whatever, but you went to that valley and came out. That's my hope, is that this person resurfaces in the near term, and I understand that they're on to better days. Currently, I don't know what that means. I don't know where we are. So tonight, this video is a little bit low. I generally am not like bouncing off the walls with you guys anyway, but this one's a little lower just because I am concerned. I am sad. But I guess the takeaway for you from my lesson on this whole thing is a couple things. One is engage your resources early and often. You're not qualified to handle these circumstances, and you're not protecting anybody or helping anybody by sitting there silently. You're not trying to get anybody in trouble. And that's why I suggest the 988 versus any other option. well, unless it's like very grim, obviously, it's happening now. I mean, of course you call 911, but in this circumstance, I didn't really have the evidence of that. So I took the path I should have, and I probably waited too long based on probably the most effective way of handling it. So learn from me on this one that you want to get a hold of them earlier. And then secondly, learn yourself. How are you handling these circumstances? How are you processing it? What have you learned, as you go through this? What have I learned as I go through this in terms of how I'm healing and maybe traps that I have in my life that could take me from, positive and generally looking forward to those thoughts and those places. This video isn't really an encouragement in any way, shape, or form. I generally try to give you something that's positive. I don't, but these are the tactics and the path that we walk. And part of the gifts we give as recovering people when we invest in the lives of somebody else, and it sometimes can be really tiring because people struggle, and the only people they can relate to are people that understand that struggle. So in this case, I was hoping to be a lifeboat, not a submarine, and I'm hoping that lifeboat, when this person resurfaces, will find better days and better ways, and hopefully I can be a guide to have that happen. Guys, I hope that if you have loved ones struggling right now, I hope that you find peace tonight. I hope you find rest. For those struggling, if you find this video, I hope you find peace and rest. If today was an absolute disaster, don't stress on it anymore. Don't obsess over it. Get up tomorrow and make progress. We have never been called to perfection. We've just been told to make progress. So any failure or perception of failure or any resentments or hurts or hangups or anything that has come into your life today, tomorrow, go to sleep. Tomorrow is your first day of progress and your first day away from this bad situation. If today was a day of victory, embrace it. Never forget it. Put it on a gratitude list tonight and tomorrow. And whatever you have for a higher power, for me it is God. If your God or your higher power is not worthy of calling on in these situations, it's time to cash yours in for a new one. I've never found a situation where God has failed me and in my brokenness or in my happiness. I'm the one that's really broken that line of communication. And so I would encourage you, as you're going through it, if you don't have a higher power, I'll lend you mine. It works. He works. My prayers with you guys struggling tonight. My prayers are for you guys in victory tonight. I hope this video gives you some information that you might be able to do as you walk with me on my journey over the last 24 hours. And, between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of trouble. And I hope you do too.